Now, the first question that I have for Lynn is a question that comes from a group of academicians and economists that have been tasked to work on various elements of Mr. LaRouche's policy. As I think most of the regular listeners to these broadcasts know, these individuals originally started out as a study group that was an arm of the Obama administration. That is no longer the case, but they are still together and with help from private foundations are continuing their work. They have become familiarly known as the Stanford Group. And their first question is this. They say, Mr. LaRouche, since the days of Charlemagne, the very idea of nation has had its foundations as a program of internal development in infrastructure. And our study of history would indicate that those programs have always served to increase what you've referred to as the potential population density of those populations, and also to raising their standard of living. That idea of what a nation is has obviously persisted over many successive generations. One of the things that we've been discussing here over the last couple of weeks is that essentially, since the end of the Second World War, they say prior to the end of the Second World War, such projects, which could be defined as rail systems, as waterways, and other such items, were in fact science drivers in their day. But since the end of the Second World War, it would seem that those types of programs were replaced by what we can best discuss as the space program. If America's commitment to that program is terminated, our argument is that it would not only lead to an almost immediate decline in labor productivity, as well as the relative potential population density of the USA, but that in fact it would denote a disintegration of the nation state itself. And we'd like you to comment on what your thoughts are on this.
One of the things we're involved in now with the basement operations and similar things is a breakthrough in recognizing certain things that were actually working, but whose identity was not adequately recognized. For example, mankind everything about mankind is different than the monkeys. The first are apes, or some Democrats. But this difference lies in a quality which we call creativity, when it's properly defined, as typified by creativity leading to scientific progress. Now, this is typified in one of the great developments in science which occurred toward the end of the 19th century, when there was a breakthrough in having discovered the periodic table and gone through a development of the periodic table to a different conception of mankind, which was reflected in things such as the development of what we call nuclear physics, or actually was developed in the proper term is physical economy, or a science of physical chemistry. In other words, chemistry meant that essentially that we are not taking something as fixed elements and putting them together as in ordinary chemistry, but recognizing there's a process of development embedded in the universe on which man's actions are acting, having an effect. And what we should be looking at is that. And when we talk about physical chemistry, as people like William Draper Harkins and others defined that toward the beginning of the century, we come into the area of the work of Vinadsky in terms of this idea of physical chemistry. And Vinadsky's division of the world among three different categories of existence, all of which are creative. That is, all of them are, there is no non-creative part of the universe. The universe in its so-called inorganic form is creative. It creates new star systems. It creates new chemistries. It creates all kinds of things. The universe is creative, inherently creative. Then you have the life. Life is inherently creative. The difference is that non-living matter doesn't think. It just creates through lawful processes embedded in the universe. Animals don't really think unless people tell them to, and then they disobey. But people are different than animals in the sense that we are also creative inherently, but our creativity is expressed differently. We don't see ourselves evolving very much. We see some devolving going on, but that's mostly due to certain bad Democrats. But the human race's voluntary role is conscious. It's the process of invention. It also is expressed in classical artistic composition. And it's classical artistic composition together with the idea of physical chemistry as a process of anti-entropic evolution, which defines what goes on with mankind. Mankind has always been creative before we discovered what creativity is. It's the nature of mankind to be creative. It's the characteristic of our species. It's a different kind of creativity than we find in the animal kingdom. But we didn't understand it. Not this way. We didn't understand it from a standpoint of chemistry or physical chemistry. And since the work of Vinadsky, Harkins, and so forth, we have a different view. Or since actually the influence of Riemann, a different view. And so we should be understanding what this means. And the current breakthrough in response to this particular question is coming to an understanding of what a higher level of creativity in terms of achievement has brought us, and to make ourselves a willful agent of that rather than sort of like a frictional agent. We do it because it's in us and we like it, so we do more of it. Then we have to ask the question, what is this thing that we like to do which is so useful? How can we understand how to use it better? What's the intention of this tool? It's a nice tool. But what is the tool telling us that we've got to do? And again, the simple problem here is typified by the corruption which occurred, especially after the Peloponnesian War in the history of the Hellenes. If you go back to the earlier period, people like the Pythagoreans, such as Achatas or Plato, you have a completely different mentality than you found after the Peloponnesian War, in the rise to power of Macedon and Aristotle of Macedon. A reductionist view. The reductionist view was called in ancient society by various terms translated into English as the oligarchical model. The oligarchical model was the concept that people should be essentially cattle. That a person should do what their grandfather did and not change. They should not progress. They should not develop. They should leave that to their betters. So you had a condition of peasantry which was tantamount virtually to slavery. And this was the condition of society under the oligarchical model. It was like a British model today. There must not be too many people. Look, we made a big mistake. We've got 6.7 billion people on this planet. That was a big mistake. We've got to reduce it immediately, says Barack Obama's master with his healthcare program. But we've said, no, mankind is inherently, voluntarily creative. When mankind is self-educated and developed to understand consciously those powers which we have as human beings, which we are using almost accidentally under certain conditions, just because we like to do it, without understanding fully what it is we're doing. And thus, we've come into this business of the space program. Now, the space program was more productive than anything that humanity did. That is, the rate of benefit of new technologies produced by the space program far exceeded everything expended on the space program. What happened is, by government decision, beginning in the middle of the war in Indochina, 67, 68, we stopped it. In fiscal year 67, 68, we cut back. And you look at, for example, around Massachusetts, around the Route 128 programs, almost like the Silicon Valley today. Silicon Valley is a desert of has-beens, or has wanted to be. And the Route 128 region became virtually like a Silicon Valley in 67, 68 because of budgetary considerations by the Johnson administration. But still, the thing was going on. And into the 1970s, we were producing 10 cents of science for every penny spent in terms of benefit. Why? Because when we go into very high energy flux density technologies, as you have to even think about getting to the moon, the rate of the increase of the productive powers of labor is accelerated, as in no other way, in a general way. We are now also at a point where science is suffering from the heritage of a disease. The disease is called reductionism. Well, it's also called mathematics. It's modern mathematics, reductionist mathematics, positivism. Positivism designs the universe as sort of a granular texture. And that's the problem. The universe is not organized like granular textures. It's not reductionist. It's not dirt. It's actually a cosmic process. But because we accepted the reductionist conception of science, which we associate with Aristotle, or worse, with the followers of Paolo Sappi, that belief, in the case of Sappi, behaviorism, destroys our ability to understand the processes of the human mind and the relationship of those processes of the mind to nature in general, to the principle of creativity or the principle of anti-entropy. So we are now, in the basement, we're now working on a program which has been defined as a subject matter called the question of cosmic radiation. That the real universe is not organized according to a granular, particulate kind of structure, but is organized on the basis of what we call cosmic radiation, away from the reductionist standpoint. But the entire tradition, especially of the positive mathematicians, is against that. So what we are saying now is we look at the space program in particular, which is what inspired this with Sky and others. We're looking at that and say, well, look, let's take this thing. We've been hoodwinked for too long. We've been told that the universe is granulated, is particulate. But it's not. And while we think like that, we're stepping on our own feet. Because the universe is not that organized that way. It's organized much more the way the Pythagoreans and Plato and others understood earlier, before Aristotle, before this modern stuff. And therefore we have to look at this with a different point of reference. For example, human creativity, all these kinds of things. When we get into this area, all kinds of doors fly open. And you realize what this crazy idea has been, which has been, preventing us from doing the things in science we should be doing. So I think the question you're posing as asked, if considered in the light of what I've just said, are put together, you have a key to understanding this problem and the opportunities that it represents. So we have to keep going along this direction. We have to break through the barriers which have been self-imposed by a reductionist method, which has encouraged by this kind of systemic positivism, mathematical positivism. Get rid of it. Free ourselves of it. And look at the universe in the way which the founders of 20th century physical chemistry, such as William Draper Hawkins, or Vronsky, or Max Planck, understood. Go back to that. Look, we've abandoned which should have been our treasure house. Go back to it. We have now created the circumstances where we force ourselves to realize what we have ignored because the teachers told us to ignore it for too long.